Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the emerald humidity of ancient Java, where the mornings begin with the scent of warm rice, clove-scented air, and distant rooster complaints echoing over thick jungle canopy. You're not waking up in a grand palace or a temple complex, but rather in a humble village house made of woven bamboo and thatch. The floor creaks under your limbs, soft, dry, woven reed mats, and outside, a rooster you didn't invite to your dreams has decided it's your personal alarm clock. You blink groggily and turn toward the low wooden tray near your sleeping mat. On it, a neat little parcel wrapped in a glistening, dewy banana leaf. This is breakfast. And no, it's not some 21st century eco-packaging trend. You're about 1,200 years early for that. You untie the simple leaf cord, probably fashioned from dried pandan strips, and unfold the parcel. Inside, a small mound of warm, sticky rice dotted with toasted coconut, a smear of sambal that's a little too enthusiastic for your sleepy mouth, and a wedge of boiled egg. Simple, hearty, mildly threatening to your taste buds if you're not into spice this early. Banana leaves in Java are basically the duct tape of daily life. They're used for cooking, wrapping, storing, and serving. Sometimes even writing, though they don't hold ink well and historians still argue whether scribes really used them for notes or just couldn't find better material in a rush. Whatever the case, their slightly waxy surface is nature's Tupperware, durable, antimicrobial, and definitely not biodegradable in under 5 minutes the way modern marketing claims. These things could survive a monsoon, or a goat, if you left your breakfast unattended. As you munch, you notice how the leaf keeps the food warm and moist without becoming soggy. It even adds a faintly vegetal note, like fresh rain on grass. You feel oddly grateful for this edible origami. Also, a little smug that your breakfast comes with zero plastic. Take that, future. Nearby, a neighbor crouches to tend her fire pit, which doubles as a stove and community gossip center. She tosses a folded leaf packet onto a flat clay pan balanced over glowing coconut husks, probably heating more rice cakes or frying cassava. The smoke smells of palm oil and charcoal. A mosquito lands on your forearm. You swat it with the grace of a startled duck. Later, if you're tasked with preparing lunch, you'll find yourself stacking banana leaves like awkward scrolls on a wooden table. Not every leaf makes the cut. Too small, too brittle, too bug-bitten. The ideal leaf is wide, glossy, and young, but not too young. It must be supple enough to fold, yet sturdy enough to contain bubbling turmeric-laced broth without splitting mid-steam. But banana leaves aren't just for practical use. There's symbolism, too. In some traditions, wrapping food with certain folds and knots signals intention, gratitude, celebration, even mourning. One wrong crease, and you might be sending the message that you're cursing the neighbor's dog, which, to be fair, has been barking at the moon all night. Later in the day, you notice a child making a tiny banana leaf boat and floating it down the irrigation canal, giggling as it spins. This is play, sure, but also ritual. Offerings to river spirits, practice for bigger ceremonies, or maybe just an attempt to communicate with the ducks. The ducks ignore it. Ducks do that. By mid-morning, the sun climbs higher, and you're sweating through your sarong as you carry a tray of snacks wrapped tightly in layered banana leaf, each one tied with rattan fiber. These will be sold at the morning market or gifted at a neighbor's baby naming ceremony. The filling? Grated cassava, palm sugar, maybe mung bean paste if someone got fancy. As you walk, you pass others doing the same, balancing baskets, trays, bundles. One older man carries a bundle so expertly wrapped it looks like it was folded by origami monks. He nods at you. His expression says, "Yes, I used 3 leaves per layer. I care." Now here's the quirky bit. Banana leaves were occasionally used to line sacred altars during ceremonies, not because of their looks, but because of their sound. When stepped on, dry banana leaves crackle, faintly, rhythmically. That soft rustling may have symbolized the arrival of ancestors or gods, or it might have just masked the sound of nervous participants' stomachs growling mid-offering. The records don't say. Historians still argue whether different species of banana trees were cultivated intentionally for different ritual uses, or whether people simply grabbed whatever leaves the goats hadn't eaten yet. The truth is, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. Eventually, the day drifts forward, the fire pit crackles again, and you catch yourself folding a banana leaf into a cone to scoop water from a stone basin. No plastic cup, no ceramic bowl. Just leaf and hand and water. Functional, beautiful, a little drippy. As the village bell, a hollowed log technically, chimes noon with 3 solemn whacks, you pause under the shade of a mango tree, your banana leaf lunch unwrapped before you, the scent of turmeric rice wafting up like a memory. And it's then, as you notice a stray chicken pecking at a discarded banana leaf parcel nearby, that you realize the leaf's final role. After packaging, cooking, gifting, and praying, it becomes compost, or chicken buffet. That's the thing about ancient Java. Every object lives multiple lives, even breakfast.
Section 2. The lamp you hold is heavy for its size, round, shallow, with a pinched lip shaped into a spout. Its surface is blackened from soot, its clay body mottled with age. A simple oil lamp, sure, but in ancient Java, this small, smudged artifact lit more than just kitchens and altars. It lit entire cosmologies. You tilt it gently, imagining where the wick would have rested. Perhaps a twisted thread of cotton dipped in sesame oil, or maybe kapok fiber, light, quick-burning, stubborn. A flame here wouldn't have been bright by modern standards. It would flicker, pull shadows across stone walls, catch glints on brass hairpins or sleeping dogs' eyes. Enough to see by, enough to dream by. In central Javanese temple reliefs, those intricate storybook carvings that ripple across shrines like dense comic strips, you can spot figures holding these lamps, some in worship, others simply walking. In one panel, a servant holds a lamp aloft as a prince peers into a scroll. In another, a woman kneels, flame cupped in both hands, eyes fixed upward. Historians still argue whether these images reflect ritual use or simply the artist's poetic imagination. Maybe both. You imagine a rainy evening, thick tropical sheets pounding down on terracotta rooftops, the gutters overflowing, frogs shouting their joy from the rice fields. Inside, a family gathers around this flickering lamp. A child asks for a story. Grandfather clears his throat, and the world of gods, demons, rice spirits, and cursed buffalo heads begins again. It's not just the rite, it's the heat. These lamps, small as they were, doubled as warming tools. One found near Borobudur had a wide base, possibly designed to sit under a tea bowl or palm-wrapped snack. Another bore soot traces on the underside, suggesting someone flipped it and used it to dry tiny bundles of herbs. Everyday ingenuity, unrecorded but unmistakable. Some lamps were suspended. You can see the holes at the rim, 3, sometimes 4. Thin cords would have threaded through, allowing it to hang from beams, banyan roots, or improvised stands. Others rested on carved wooden tripods, their glow casting triplicate shadows, making everything feel just a little more magical. The ancients understood ambiance. There are whispers, half folklore, half archaeological gossip, of lamps made for travelers. Small, lidded ones, their light muted through translucent horn or shell. One story speaks of a merchant who carried a lamp etched with compass points, claiming it guided his path through mist-covered valleys. Others laugh, calling that superstition. Still, it's hard not to want it to be true. Then there's the lamp said to hold memory. Not metaphorically, literally. In certain mountain villages, it's said that clay lamps once burned during funerals, and afterward the ash was buried beneath newly planted trees, a way to carry the soul forward, one flicker at a time. You picture a sapling swaying, light glancing off its leaves, and wonder if that soul remembers the lamp. Not all lamps were made equal. Royal ones, those excavated from palace ruins near Jogjakarta, sometimes bore silver inlay or handles shaped like makara beasts, all curling trunks and fishtails. One lamp was crafted entirely from bronze, with tiny slits along its base, possibly meant to cast patterned light, like a medieval disco ball, but quieter. Yet the most touching lamps are the humble ones, the ones shaped like little turtles, ducks, or frogs. They seem whimsical, but might have been votive offerings. Some were placed in shrines to Dewi Sri, the rice goddess, their flames coaxing fertility from the fields. Others may have been toys, or memorial tokens, or simply someone's favorite way to light their bathhouse. In one case, a lamp shaped like a curled snake was found nestled inside a jar of betel leaves. Why? A gift? A prank? A protection from toothaches? No one knows. But you can imagine the moment. Someone lifting that jar and finding a snake-shaped lamp curled among the greenery. A surprise. A smile. Maybe a scream. The oils themselves, what fed the flames, were an entire industry. Coconut oil was common, especially along the coasts, but sesame was favored inland. Candlenut oil, thick and pungent, burned longest. Scented oils infused with pandan, citronella, or even crushed orchid were offered to temples or used in romantic gestures. A lamp left outside a lover's home wasn't just practical. It was a message. You sit quietly now, watching the imagined flame dance in the bowl of clay. Your own reflection moves faintly in the oil's ghost. A lull settles here. Time feels folded here. Some historians suggest that lamps like this were used during courtship. Two lovers, separated by families or fate, might sit in adjacent houses and light matching lamps at the same time. Looking out through carved screens, they'd see the other's light across the courtyard. A kind of silent conversation, a mutual glow. There's a beauty in that thought, that a simple bowl of clay and fire could speak without words. In the museum's quieter wing, you pass a broken lamp with scorch marks on its edge, too close to its own flame, perhaps. Or maybe it was held at an angle, the wick too long. The heat licked up, cracked the clay. A small disaster. A story without words. You remember one final tale, told to you by a Javanese craftswoman who shapes replica lamps for local temples. She swears some old lamps still burn fire. Not flame, she says, smiling faintly, but fire. When you press, she shrugs. It's in the clay, in the way they're shaped. Some are meant to burn even after they're cold. You don't quite understand, but you believe her anyway.
You shift the lamp to one side, and beneath it, half buried in the imagined soil of a long-lost Javanese village, you find a curious item, a small carved stick about the length of your finger, rounded at one end, and etched with fine parallel grooves. A toothbrush? A stylus? A personal back-scratcher? Actually, it's probably none of those, at least not in the way we use them today. This is a chewing stick, or more precisely, a siwak, or kayu sugi in local parlance. Still used in many parts of Southeast Asia, it's a simple tool with complex meaning. In ancient Java, it was not just for dental hygiene, it was ritual, identity, and sometimes even flirtation. You hold it up to your nose. No smell now, but in its time, it might have been cut from the stem of a fragrant tree, maybe guava or neem, or the betel shrub itself.
When chewed, the fibers would fan out into a soft brush, and those grooves along the shaft weren't decoration. They were grip, worn into the wood by countless fingers, generations of quiet mornings. Historians still argue whether these sticks were used before or after meals, or whether chewing them in public was a status marker, like flicking open a gold case of breath mints. Some old manuscripts suggest people passed them to guests as part of hospitality, like a modern-day wet towel. Others imply they were gifted as tokens of intimacy. The ambiguity makes it all the more interesting. You picture a young nobleman strolling under tamarind trees, casually gnawing on his siwak as he tries to catch the eye of someone across the rice field. He's not brushing his teeth, not exactly. He's posing. The siwak dangles at an angle, a sly smile, a hint of crushed clove and cardamom on his breath. You've definitely seen worse flirting. There's even a court poem, half remembered now, that describes the chewing stick as the twig that sweetens speech. You wonder if that was literal, or just a metaphor for charming someone with fresh breath and poetic timing. Of course, not everyone had access to guava twigs. In the highlands, villagers used whatever was local, sometimes bamboo slivers or lengths of cinnamon bark. Some soaked the sticks in rice wine overnight. Others wrapped them in thin strips of cloth for gifting. One excavation turned up a lacquered case with 3 carefully sized sticks inside, bundled with a dried orchid. Love letter? Mourning kit? Ritual tool? No one knows. There's evidence, too, that siwak were used in tandem with betel chewing, a daily ritual involving the chewing of betel leaf with areca nut, slaked thyme, and other flavorings. After the bright red juices had been spit, a siwak was often used to clean the teeth and mouth. And if the stick turned pink at the tip, that was seen as auspicious, or at least vivid. You imagine the sequence: a clack of the betel box opening, the rustle of lime-streaked leaf, the crack of nut between teeth, and then, after a rinse with rainwater, the siwak, gently bitten, turned, brushed, bitten again. This was grooming, yes, but not private. It was public. It was social. It was, dare you say it, a kind of performance art. In courts, the chewing stick became an extension of etiquette. To chew without shielding the mouth, rude. To chew too loudly, scandalous. To offer your chewed stick to another, a proposal or a dare, depending on the context. Archaeologists once found a carved wooden cup containing 20 half-chewed siwak near the remains of a bathhouse. Were they discarded? Saved for reuse? Tokens of some ritual? No one's certain. But 20 chewed sticks in one place definitely tells you something about community hygiene, or at least about how no one ever cleaned that cup. And don't be fooled by the stick's humble form. Some were works of art. One royal example, unearthed near Throlowan, had gold leaf pressed into its grooves and tiny bells suspended from its end. Imagine brushing your teeth with a jingle. Not subtle, but possibly fashionable. Some say monks used them in silence, slowly chewing while walking meditative circles around temple courtyards. Others say children sucked on bitter siwak dipped in turmeric to ward off colds. Still others claim they were used by dancers who chewed them before performances to moisten their mouths and sharpen their voices. It's likely all of these are true, and more besides. A 10th century traveler's journal describes seeing entire marketplaces devoted to grooming tools, siwak bundled like firewood, set beside clay jars of palm sugar and dried tamarind. You imagine the scene: merchants barking prices, women haggling with baskets on their heads, a cloud of dust rising with every step, and rows upon rows of chewing sticks tied with red string, waiting to freshen the world. One fragment of folklore even claims that if you buried a siwak at midnight on a full moon, it would grow into a tree that whispered secrets only to those who brushed often and lied seldom. You almost want to test that one. There's a practical side, too. Siwak contain natural antibacterial properties. Modern science even backs that up. The twigs kill bacteria, polish enamel, and stimulate saliva. Not bad for a stick someone chewed for fun 1,000 years ago. Still, one wonders about their other uses. Could they double as message carriers, hidden in sleeves or turbans? A merchant once swore he smuggled a gem inside a hollowed-out siwak past a checkpoint. He might have been lying, but in a world of whispers and rituals, anything is possible. You sit now beneath the imagined canopy of a Javanese banyan tree, the siwak balanced across your palm, and think about how something so small, so throwaway by today's standards, once carried this much meaning, once sweetened speech, once shaped smiles. And somewhere in the distance, perhaps someone is still chewing one now, humming softly, keeping time with the past.
You dust your hands and peer into a woven basket by the door of a reconstructed Javanese kitchen. Inside lies a collection of dull, battered stones, egg-sized, uneven, dark with wear. At first glance, they look like nothing, river rocks maybe. But then you see it, the faint concavity worn into the center of the flattest one, like the ghost of 1,000 circular motions. This is a grinding stone, and it's not for ritual or art. It's for spice. It's for dinner. It's for everyday survival. You kneel beside it, instinctively pressing one of the rounder stones into the curve of the flat slab. It fits your palm perfectly. You start to move it, slowly, rhythmically. There's no turmeric root here tonight, but you imagine the resistance, the golden smear, the warm stain it would leave on your fingertips for days. And of course, someone would always forget not to rub their eye afterward. That's a timeless mistake. Historians still argue whether the mortars of Java were borrowed from Indian culinary tradition or developed entirely locally. Some point to their similarity to Tamil kitchen tools, others to older Austronesian traditions of root grinding. Either way, the motion is unmistakable. You grind, not crush. You roll, not pound. There's music in it, a kitchen rhythm, one that hasn't changed much in 1,000 years. Most of the homes in ancient Java, especially in the Central Plains, had a corner dedicated to food preparation, a little shrine of stone and smoke. There were no chimneys. The walls were often blackened from years of cooking, and the grinding stone lived there, half buried in ash and flower petals, always in use, always needed. You imagine a mother and daughter, side by side, sleeves pushed up, grinding candle nuts and lemongrass into a paste so fragrant it could chase off mosquitoes. The daughter complains that the nuts won't crush properly. The mother replies with a proverb, something about patience being the strongest spice. The daughter rolls her eyes. She's heard it before. A traveler's diary from the 9th century mentions a house where the floor had worn smooth around the grinding stone, an entire generation's footsteps marking the space like rings in a tree. You wonder if the stone ever had a name. You wouldn't be surprised. There's a story, a whispered one, that a widow once ground galanga for 40 days straight after her husband died, refusing to eat anything else. They say she was trying to summon his ghost with scent, or maybe she just missed his cooking. You lean over the slab now and imagine the pastes it might have known: red chili, ginger, tamarind pulp, toasted shrimp paste, young green peppercorns, and always salt. Always. But not just for food. These stones had other duties. Midwives used them to crush herbs for childbirth tonics. Priests ground incense resin into powder for temple offerings. Young men ground charcoal with coconut oil for ink, sometimes to write poetry, sometimes to copy tax records. Art and paperwork, equally messy. One priest reportedly used a grinding stone to prepare pigment for tattoos, mixing soot and turmeric with goat's blood and chanting all the while. His ink was said to prevent betrayal. Whether that was true or just a way to charge more is anyone's guess. And when stones broke, they weren't thrown away. They became doorstops, paperweights, talismanic objects buried in house foundations for luck. There's even a tale of a widow who used hers as a weapon against a thief and was praised in a village song for 10 years afterward. Some stones had handles carved into them, some were left plain. Some were passed down in families, like heirlooms that could crush ginger and trauma alike. Others were gifts at weddings, often paired with a basket of salt and a clay pot of vinegar. A quiet way of saying, here's to flavor and patience and learning not to burn everything. Of course, this brings you to the quiet debate of the century. Was grinding really the best way to release flavor? Or did pounding with a vertical mortar release the soul of the spice more completely? You won't take sides. You weren't there. But the arguments persist in faded recipe books and shouted through market stalls. There's even a play where two characters argue over spice grinding methods while falling in love. She prefers circular motion. He pounds vertically. They fight, they kiss. The kitchen burns down. 5 acts. Critics called it over-seasoned. Some temples had communal grinding stones, believed to be blessed. Pilgrims would borrow a pinch of whatever was last prepared there, believing it carried sacred essence. Curry with a hint of enlightenment, as one monk described it. And of course, no discussion of spice stones would be complete without the legend of the crying stone. According to myth, one young girl ground so many onions on the same slab that it absorbed her sorrow, and now, if touched under a new moon, the stone weeps. Someone probably tested it. Someone probably made a soup out of those tears. You sit back, your imaginary hands sore, your imaginary kitchen full of rich smells. The grinding stone rests between your feet like an old friend, humble, heavy, full of memory. It never tells you what it was used for last, but you know it was something that mattered. Because when history whispers through objects, it doesn't shout about kings. It hums about dinner, about routine, about someone kneeling just like you, wondering whether this paste would be too spicy for their uncle or not spicy enough for their cousin. And that, more than temples or texts, might be the most human thing of all.
You step into the garden, not a royal one, not a manicured imperial dream, but a modest yard behind an ordinary home in ancient Java. The soil is warm and dark beneath your feet. To your left, a stand of banana trees rustles lazily in the wind. To your right, a tangled row of lemongrass, turmeric, and something that smells suspiciously like beetle vine. This is the herbal edge of the house, not the showy kind with orchids and peacocks, but the working kind, where medicine and dinner sprout from the same root system, where a single leaf might heal a fever, calm a crying baby, or flavor soup. You kneel beside a cluster of tall stalks, galangal. You dig gently with your hands and uncover the knotted root, pale orange with streaks of red, like ancient ginger having a midlife crisis. You break off a small piece and hold it to your nose. It smells of pine and citrus and something deeper, something strange, something ancient. Galangal wasn't just for flavor. It was energy in root form, a cure for fatigue, a charm against evil spirits, a stimulant, a digestive, a love potion, depending on who you asked and how much you used. Some midwives even brewed it into tea for nervous grooms before a wedding night. Whether it helped with nerves or just ensured a spicy kiss is still debated. Historians still argue whether certain herbs were primarily culinary or medicinal, especially in early Javanese texts where recipes and remedies blur. Boil 3 roots and feed it to a man with a crooked back, one line reads. Is it a soup? Is it a cure? Both? Neither? A few steps away, you find turmeric, its roots gnarled and yellow, its leaves tall and wide. Women here used it for nearly everything, to cook rice, to treat cuts, to stain cloth,
to color their cheeks on festival days. Turmeric was the highlighter pen of ancient Java, a bright, earthy scribble across everything from food to faith. And next to that, kencor, sometimes called aromatic ginger, shorter, sweeter, a little less aggressive, used in tonics for coughs and in jamu, a kind of herbal elixir that your guide swears by for everything from headaches to heartbreak. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. You never know which it is until after the third cup. Then there's betel, glossy leaves trailing up the trellis, their stems wrapped like gossip around the bamboo poles. You've heard of betel chewing before, that red spit you see in Southeast Asian folktales. But here, the plant is quiet, shy, almost apologetic for the mess it makes. People chewed the leaves with areca nut and slaked lime. It gave a buzz, a bright red smile, and a reputation. Some rulers banned it, some encouraged it. All knew it had power. There's a recipe that suggests chewing betel leaf before negotiations to sharpen the tongue and soften the voice. Someone even claimed it made their poems better. It also probably stained a lot of wedding garments. You pause under a guava tree, where bees hum lazily around the blossoms. The fruit hangs low and heavy, not ripe yet, but you can imagine the flavor. Sharp, green, sweet, and a little musky, like biting into a scented rumor. Children climb these trees, lovers too, probably. Guava juice was used to settle stomachs, to sweeten dull days, and in one story, to trick a tiger into thinking you were too fragrant to eat. A grandmother in a tale once treated an entire family with only the contents of her backyard. If you can't find a cure among your own plants, you're not really sick, you're just bored. You suspect she also had very strong opinions about soup. Closer to the house, you find pandan, those long, blade-like leaves tied in careful knots. Pandan was the vanilla of Java, the perfume in everything from cakes to rice, the scent that whispered home through temple offerings and dinner steam. One poem calls pandan the scent of a mother's breath when she sings. That's specific and a little sad. Children played games with the leaves, weaving them into bracelets and fans. Lovers braided secret messages into them. Pandan was believed to bring calm, luck, and just the right amount of sweetness. Some even believed a pillow stuffed with pandan leaves could ensure pleasant dreams, or at least fewer ants. And finally, ginger. Always ginger. Not the kind you toss into soda, but the wild, biting kind that wakes up your whole mouth. Ginger for digestion, ginger for fevers, ginger for gossip. One folk healer claimed a ginger paste applied behind the ears could keep you from hearing lies. You test it. Nothing happens. Maybe you're just not listening hard enough. There's a bowl by the garden wall, stone, worn, moss-covered. Inside, dried peels, bits of bark, crushed leaves, a simple sorting bowl, the kind you'd see in any household. This is where herbs waited their turn, where someone sat each morning shelling tamarind or plucking dry leaves for tea. Not grand, not sacred, just daily. You sit beside it and close your eyes. A breeze stirs the lemongrass. Somewhere a rooster argues with the wind. You imagine 100 mornings, 1,000 afternoons where someone sat right here deciding whether their neighbor's fever called for basil or cinnamon bark. You open your eyes and realize this garden wasn't a pharmacy or a kitchen or a magic shop. It was all of them, a living shelf of instincts and trial and error, of lullabies made with leaves, a place where you could pluck a cure, a flavor, or a memory, and maybe not know which one you had until it bloomed in the pot.
You step from the garden's edge into a shaded breezeway where the scent of herbs gives way to something sweeter, wood smoke and palm sugar maybe. A grinding rhythm hums softly in the background, like a lullaby made of stone. There's someone sitting on a low stool ahead, their legs folded like a cat's, a massive stone mortar between their knees. The pestle rises and falls with a grace that only comes from 1,000 repetitions. This is the kitchen's quieter cousin, the pep space, where ingredients aren't so much cooked as they are convinced into submission. The mortar and pestle in ancient Java were more than tools. They were instruments, singing bowls of daily life, made of volcanic rock carved by hand, passed from grandmother to granddaughter. The stone warmed in sunlight, cooled under moonlight, and rarely moved more than a few meters in its entire lifetime. You take a turn. The pestle is heavier than expected. It fits your hand awkwardly at first, then naturally, as if your wrist has always known this movement, this slow circle, this gentle pressure. You crush dried turmeric, releasing a scent that stings your nose and tickles your brain. You add palm sugar shards, brown and fragrant, sticky to the touch. You grind, slowly, carefully. Historians still argue whether the iconic Javanese spice blends like bambu or samba were standardized by early recipes or simply evolved through muscle memory. There's no written record of exact measures, only oral traditions that say things like enough to wake your father, but not your grandmother. Beside you, a tray holds all the usual suspects: shallots, garlic, candle nuts, bird's-eye chilies that glint like ruby threads. A banana leaf is folded into a tiny cup to hold salt. A splash of tamarind paste waits patiently in a coconut shell ladle. You recognize some of the smells from dinner in modern Java, but here, in their raw state, they feel wilder, like jungle memories, barely tamed. Someone adds shrimp paste to the mix. It smells authoritative, like an opinion you didn't ask for but can't stop thinking about. You look to the fire pit nearby, just a ring of stones and an iron trivet. A clay pot sweats quietly above it, steam curling from its lid. You peek inside, rice porridge slowly thickening with strips of banana stem and a swirl of coconut milk added for luck or digestion or both. On a shelf overhead, really just a plank suspended with vines, you spot other containers. Dried jackfruit slices, cracked peppercorns, dried snake gourd strips, all labeled in someone's memory, not ink. There's a jar of fermented durian paste. You open it, you close it, firmly. Some experiences don't need to be immersive. A child walks by carrying a bundle of banana leaves. You follow them to a low table where the leaves are being used as wrappers, stuffed with rice, grated coconut, a twist of palm sugar in the center, then folded like origami dreams and tied with strips of young bamboo. Snacks, but sacred in their way. Offerings in temple festivals, apologies in family quarrels, love notes sealed in steam. There's a kind of clay mold sitting on the edge of the table. You pick it up, it's shaped like a flower with a tiny hole in the middle. These were used to press cookies from glutinous rice flour, dyed with butterfly pea petals, then steamed and dusted with powdered coconut. You imagine biting into one, soft, slightly chewy, sweet as an old secret. You notice a strip of bark tied above the doorway, cinnamon, not for scent, but to keep ants away, though it doesn't always work. You must ask the ants nicely, someone jokes. You're not sure they're kidding. Another worker offers you a sip of herbal tea, cool, dark, brewed with roselle flowers and a thread of pandan. It's tangy, grounding, like a lullaby with backbone. You ask what it's for. They smile. For tired eyes or broken hearts. There's a philosophy here that kitchen tools don't belong to the cook. They belong to the ingredients. You're just a translator. The mortar and pestle speaks spice. The ladle speaks broth. The banana leaf says, be gentle. I carry what you cannot hold. You glance at a long-handled skimmer carved from coconut shell, stained dark with use. It hangs from a peg like a memory in midair. No two spoons were ever quite alike. Some even had names. One story tells of a woman whose spoon was so well balanced, it was said she could stir a pot and resolve an argument at the same time. You don't doubt it. A gust of wind lifts the hanging herbs overhead. They twirl briefly, casting fleeting shadows on the wall, patterns of time. You hear a chicken cluck lazily outside. A baby wails. Someone laughs. You grind another clove into the bowl. This isn't fast food. This is memory food. Food that requires you to sit down, slow down, press and stir and wait. There's a word whispered here often, sabah. It means patience, but not the kind that waits for something better, the kind that stays with what is and helps it unfold. You stay a while longer listening to the scrape of pestle against stone. It's the sound of someone remembering how to make something from nothing, how to hold chaos in a bowl and press it into flavor. You think every family has its own blend, and every kitchen, every stone, every spoon remembers.
The scent of fresh water and wet leaves draws you out of the kitchen. You follow it toward a clearing where long troughs made of split bamboo trickle steadily, their channels winding like lazy snakes across the compound. Women squat at the edge of a basin, their hands red with effort, scrubbing textiles against smooth stone. Laughter rises between them in bursts, gentle gossip, half-sung complaints, and shared jokes that have likely been passed down longer than the soap recipe they're using. This is Laundry Day in ancient Java, and no, it's not optional. You crouch beside one of the washers, watching her twist a length of batik cloth with practiced ease. The pattern, still visible despite the soap, ripples like water made solid. Indigo swirls and saffron lines, stiffened with wax and history. The cloth is dunked again, then beaten lightly against a log, not with malice, just clarity. Historians still argue whether batik techniques developed independently in Java or arrived via trade routes, refined over time by local genius. What's undeniable is that by the 8th century, Javanese textiles were already appearing in Chinese inventories and Indian markets, each length of cloth a tapestry of symbolism. Fertility, rain, good fortune, protection from snake bites, sometimes all on the same sarong. You're handed a bar of soap. It smells like crushed citrus peels, mixed with ashes and the oil of candle nuts. You lather your hands and begin scrubbing alongside them. The fabric is stubborn at first, but slowly yields. Water splashes your elbows. The rhythm feels ancient, muscle-deep, like sweeping a temple floor or planting rice by hand. There's a whole process here. Soak, scrub, rinse, twist, sun-dry. Repeat. But also a social one. Elders teaching technique. Younger ones stealing glances. Children chasing frogs through puddles while shirts flap overhead like surrender flags. A woman in a russet wrap hums softly. You recognize the tune from earlier, a kitchen lullaby now repurposed for cloth. The melody threads its way through the steam rising off warm water, through the slap of linen on stone. Off to the side, another group prepares dyes. Clay pots hold infusions of bark, roots, and flowers. A boy stirs a pot of crushed mango leaves with a bamboo paddle. The green dye foams like seaweed. Another pot contains mashed noni fruit, sour and pungent. Nearby, strands of thread dangle from a branch, drying into muted ochres and earthy grays. Colors chosen not just for beauty, but meaning. Teal for safe travels, russet for fertility, white for mourning or weddings, depending on the village. You notice a carved stone weight used to press cloth flat. It bears the faint image of a sun and a lizard, barely visible under years of use. One woman leans in and whispers, "For good luck, or maybe just decoration." No one agrees. She winks. Someone pulls a finished length of fabric from the rinse tub and unrolls it across the grass.
The wax patterns resist the dye perfectly, revealing swirling birds and abstract leaves in gold against a background of indigo so deep it might have been harvested from night itself. A girl walks by balancing a wooden pole across her shoulders, two baskets hanging from either end. One full of damp clothes, the other filled with stones to keep the balance even. She barely wobbles. You try lifting it later. You nearly fall over. The laundry area, though utilitarian, is ringed by beauty. Ferns grow from cracks in the stone walls. Tiny red dragonflies skitter across the surface of the water. A monitor lizard suns itself on a flat rock, unconcerned. Somewhere nearby, a bird calls out, its cry like a question with no answer. Someone points out a line of shirts hung on a bamboo rack, arranged smallest to largest, each marked with a single colored stitch near the collar. That's how clothing was claimed. No tags, no embroidery, just a dot of saffron, a stripe of indigo, a secret between washer and wearer. There's a legend whispered among the washers. Once, a nobleman disguised himself as a servant and worked in the laundry for a month just to impress a woman known for her clean sarongs and sharp tongue. When he finally revealed himself, she laughed, said his folds were sloppy, and married the village spice merchant instead. You try folding a tunic. It ends up shaped more like a question mark than a rectangle. No one mocks you. They simply nod and refold it properly, with the corners crisp as a priest's frown. Later, a ceremonial robe is rinsed and lifted from the basin. Its weight is obvious. It clings like memory. Gold thread glints in the sun, woven into the hem in looping patterns that mean something, probably. Someone says it belonged to a midwife. Another insists it was worn by a dancer. Maybe both. Why not? You trail your fingers through the rinse water. It's warm, slightly gritty, smells faintly of limes and lye. The wind shifts, lifting the corner of a half-dried sarong and pressing it lightly against your face. It smells clean, honest, like labor and leaf smoke, and the stories clothes remember long after they're worn. You linger, watching as the sun slowly climbs. Steam rises from every surface. The air thickens, but the work continues. Clothes are laid out on woven mats, flipped like pages of a storybook written without ink. One woman hands you a finished wrap, folds it neatly, and places it in your arms. You don't know whose it is. You carry it anyway, careful not to crease the fabric. Later, you'll forget the exact pattern, but you'll remember how it felt. Sun-warmed, water softened, folded with care. The weight of it resting against your chest like a small, patient animal. And you'll remember the laughter, the splash, the hum of a tune that belongs to no one and everyone, echoing quietly through the threads.
You wander beyond the dye vats and drying cloth into a part of the compound that smells of bamboo, beeswax, and heat. Here, under a sloping roof woven from palm leaves and anchored with braided rope, sits a tidy corner of calm precision, the writing house. The floor is smooth packed clay, cool beneath your bare feet. You pause on the threshold, noticing a scroll stretched flat under stones at each corner, drying slowly. The script is dense and fluid, like black vines curling across pale bark. You resist the urge to touch it. Inside, a scribe glances up and nods. She wears a simple teal tunic, sleeves pushed high on her forearms, fingers stained with soot and sap. She's trimming the tip of a writing stylus with a knife so small it could double as a hairpin. You watch as she tests the nib on a piece of bark, her strokes deliberate, the line as fine as spider silk. In ancient Java, writing is both a tool and a spell. It records trade, law, poetry, and prayer, but it also has weight, rhythm, and a touch of the divine. Most scripts are carved or painted onto lontar palm leaves, cured until stiff, then cut into long, narrow strips.
The result looks nothing like modern paper. It's more like a leafy bookmark, layered with wisdom. The scribe gestures for you to sit. She slides a sheet of palm leaf toward you, smooth on one side, lightly fibrous on the other. She hands you a stylus, a tiny bamboo wand with a needle-sharp tip, and dips hers into a mixture of charcoal soot and sugar water. The scent is oddly sweet, like candied ash. You try a few strokes. Your lines wobble like frightened snakes. She doesn't comment. Instead, she leans over and draws a single perfect glyph beside your mess. It means rice. You smile. Appropriate. Historians still argue whether the script used here, kawi, was an import from India, a local invention, or both. What's certain is that it's an elegant chameleon, used for love poetry, legal decrees, philosophical riddles, and instructions for treating foot fungus with boiled yam. A pile of finished leaves rests beside you, bundled together with cord and capped in polished wood. These are manuscripts, or longtar books. Some are religious texts. Others are lists of medicinal herbs, or family lineages, or farming proverbs, like "never scold the buffalo before the rain arrives," which you assume has some deep rural wisdom or is just a farmer's idea of a joke. Nearby, an apprentice is heating wax over the fire. It will be used to seal one end of a scroll, not to lock it from view, but to protect it from humidity and bugs. He hums as he works, balancing a tiny copper ladle over the flame, the wax swirling like honeyed lava. The moment it melts, he pours a perfect circle on the scroll's edge, then presses in a carved seal, a bird with outstretched wings, possibly a phoenix, possibly just a goose with ambition. You ask what he's writing. He says, "Abide to forest spirits," mostly cautionary, they're nosy. He doesn't elaborate. There's a carved wooden box under the desk. The scribe opens it to reveal pigments: brick red from cinnabar, pale yellow from turmeric, indigo from crushed berries. She mixes a bit of each with water and sets them in shallow dishes. She explains, for decorative scripts or love letters. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. Everyone writes prettier when they're in love. One wall of the house is hung with small charms, amulets made of folded palm, stamped clay tokens, bundles of scented herbs tied with red thread. Each one has a single glyph painted or carved on it. These are mnemonic charms, teaching tools, good luck totems, or simply bookmarks with personality. You're handed a short chant to copy. It's a protection spell for children, invoking water spirits, birds, and strong rice. The chant flows across the leaf like a lullaby pressed into bark. You find yourself swaying a little as you trace the syllables. The rhythm is soothing. Someone passes by the window carrying a tray of inkstones. They're carved with fish and lizards and spirals, and each one has its own specific use, some for red ink, some for soot, some just for water. One has teeth marks on it. You decide not to ask. Behind the writing house, a garden hums with the plants used to make ink and paper: bamboo, banana, turmeric, even orchids. You spot a cluster of bees hovering over a flowering bush, oblivious to your intrusion. The scribe waves toward it. She says, "We let them help." She half serious. "If they land on your writing, it means the words will be remembered." A few children sit at low benches in the corner, struggling over their letters. One has written the word for banana upside down. Another has drawn a perfect spiral and insists it means "I am hungry." A third is asleep, face pressed into her scroll, ink staining her cheek like a tribal mark. The scribe sighs but smiles. There's no single language in ancient Java, at least not one. Old Malay, Sanskrit, Javanese, they swirled together like dye and rinse water. Traders, monks, sailors, and princes all leave words behind like dropped coins. The scripts adapt. They always do. You trace your fingers across a finished scroll. The text feels raised, like braille for ghosts. The scribe says this one tells a story about a golden turtle who carries the world on its back.
The turtle, she says, is still walking, slowly, patiently. That's why the world wobbles sometimes. You laugh. She shrugs. Maybe. Outside, the sun is shifting. Shadows slant longer. The ink dries quicker. The wind picks up, rustling the hanging scrolls like there's whispering to each other, or to you. You pack your leaf carefully, fold it with care, and slide it into your sash. It crinkles softly with every step you take, a quiet souvenir of a time when every word had to be carved, painted, pressed, when language wasn't just heard, but touched. You leave the writing house with stained fingers and a mind full of glyphs. Somewhere behind you, a scribe hums and starts a new scroll. You don't know what she's writing, but it feels like your story.
You follow a narrow path between low stone walls, your feet brushing over moss and worn river pebbles. The scent changes as you move, less of ink and bark now, more of smoke and something crisp, metallic in the air. You're approaching the forge. It's not the towering blast furnace of medieval Europe or the sprawling smithies of ancient Rome. No, this forge in ancient Java is more modest. A sunken clay hearth dug into the ground, ringed with cracked stones and shaded by a thatch awning that creaks in the warm breeze. You feel the heat before you see the flames. The fire roars quietly, steady and controlled, fed by coconut husks and hardwood charcoal. Two men squat beside it, working in rhythmic silence. One pumps a bamboo bellows with his feet, keeping the heat even. The other holds a pair of wooden tongs, gripping a glowing blade that could be either a dagger or a very ambitious butter knife. In Java, metallurgy is closer to alchemy than brute strength. You sit on a woven mat laid out by the apprentices and watch as the blade is dunked into a small clay jar of cloudy liquid. It sizzles and steams. You lean closer. It smells like rice vinegar and beetle leaves. Probably intentional, possibly just lunch leftovers. The smith smiles. "Quenching bath," he says. "Secret recipe." He winks. You're not sure if he's joking. In the corner lies a stack of Kedis blades, half-finished and quietly glinting. These aren't swords in the traditional sense, they're asymmetrical daggers with undulating spines and mystical reputations. Every twist in a Kedis has meaning, political, spiritual, personal. Some are straight, others curl like smoke. The smith picks one up and turns it in his palm. "This one is for a wedding," he says. "See the 7 waves?" He traces the pattern. "That means harmony. Good digestion, too." You nod solemnly. Priorities. He lays the blade flat on a wooden stump and begins etching a line of silver into its side with the tip of a sharpened bone. You watch, hypnotized, as the soft glint of silver melts into the darker steel, forming a motif of rice stalks and coiled snakes. Symbolism here is everything. Historians still argue whether the Kedis was originally a weapon, a status symbol, or a charm against stomachaches and bad dreams. Likely all three. It's the Swiss Army knife of Southeast Asia, except sacred, heavily stylized, and occasionally haunted. A young boy with soot on his chin brings over a box of inlays, small gems, brass spirals, even dried flower seeds. Each is a potential offering to the blade. Some Kedis have cavities near the hilt where blessings are sealed in wax or tree sap. This one, he said, holding up a cloudy green bead, was dipped in moonlight. You grin. He doesn't. You're handed a chunk of dark ore. It's surprisingly heavy, rough with sharp edges and a dull gleam. This could be iron from the island's own earth or scrap traded in from Srivijaya ports. Either way, it's been smelted in small, controlled batches. No massive furnaces here, just clever use of heat, time, and an intimate relationship with fire. The bellows change rhythm. Another apprentice begins to hammer a blade flat. using a stone-faced mallet that thuds more like a drum than a tool. Every strike is precise. There's no shouting, no frantic sweat, just patience. Smithing here is as much meditation as craft. You glance over and notice a row of completed tools beside the kedis display. Sickles, chisels, small cleavers, everyday weapons in the war against coconuts and tree bark. They gleam with the same care as any royal dagger. You pick up a pruning knife. It fits your hand like an old friend. The forge also produces ornaments, hairpins shaped like birds mid-flight, bronze bangles that chime when touched. You're handed a small pendant, pressed tin in the shape of a turtle. It's warm from the fire and slightly crooked. You love it instantly. One corner of the workshop is curtained off with heavy dyed cloth. The smith catches your glance and lifts the corner for a moment. Inside, shelves of older blades wrapped in linen, their hilts carved with screaming faces and celestial beasts. Heirlooms, he whispers, too tired to be used, still sharp. And woman arrives carrying an offering tray, a handful of white rice, some fragrant leaves, and a cracked egg. She bows to the forge and places the tray on the stone ledge. The egg begins to cook slowly in the residual heat. No one touches it. You sip water from a gourd handed to you by an apprentice and watch as a final blade is removed from the fire. It's still red hot, alive with movement. They lower it into a trough filled with crushed banana leaves and oil. A hiss, a puff of scented steam. It smells like metal and jungle at once. Someone begins humming softly, a low, looping melody that reminds you of birdsong slowed down. The smith hums along. It's not for performance. It's for timing, for calm. You ask if every forge hums the same tune. He shrugs. Every fire has its own song. Ours is just in tune today. There's a mural painted along one wall, nearly faded away. A large blacksmith deity, his arms ringed with bracelets, his face split in half, one side human, one side flame. Beneath his feet are the tools of the trade. Beneath that, words you can't read but feel like a prayer disguised as instructions. Before you leave, they press a finished blade into your palm. Not a weapon, but a butter knife. Thin, gently curved, still warm from polishing. For slicing sweet rice cakes, the smith says. You thank them and bow. The blade rests quietly in your sash. Not deadly, not magical, just perfect. As you step outside, the air feels cooler, the sky softer. You pass under a palm tree and hear somewhere, above, the faint ring of a bangle swaying in the breeze. The narrow path leads downhill now, winding like a riverbed between tall banana trees and scattered clumps of ginger. The air has thickened with humidity again, and the faint tang of fermentation rides the breeze. You spot it before you hear it, a small open-air distillery crouched at the edge of a terrace where the jungle falls away into mist. This is the domain of the brewers and fermenters, those ancient culinary magicians of Java who spent just as much time watching jars as they did actually stirring anything. The ground underfoot is tamped earth, soft and fragrant with decades of spilled rice mash and fallen blossoms. A few chickens wander through like they own the place. You step aside respectfully. The first thing you see are the jars, big, brown, lidded stone vessels lined up in rows like sleeping elephants. Some are covered with banana leaves, others sealed with wax, and a few are open just enough for you to catch a glimpse and a whiff of what's brewing inside. The head brewer, a woman with silver hair and a cinnamon-colored wrap skirt, waves you over. Her hands are stained dark from tamarind and soot, and her laugh sounds like cracked bamboo. She pulls back the lid of one jar and gestures for you to lean in. You do. The smell is hard to explain. Sweet, sour, musky, almost floral. It grabs your nose and doesn't let go. Lempung, she says. Fermented rice cake. Strong enough to make your dreams louder. She hands you a small palm leaf cup of a pale fizzy liquid. You sip. It's sweet at first, like old pears, but quickly turns tangy and finishes with a warmth that starts in your teeth and drifts behind your eyes. You blink. She grins. First brew, gentle as moonlight. The jars hold more than rice wine. There's tapai, a sticky fermented cassava that smells like candied wood and tastes like rebellious pudding. There's tuak, made from coconut sap, foaming slightly and surprisingly smoky. And then there's something she only calls midnight vinegar. You decline that one for now. Just instinct. One apprentice carries past a bamboo basket full of small fruits you don't recognize. They're peeled and packed into jars already half full of brine and dark sugar. Candied fruit? You ask. The brewer chuckles. Not yet. First, they must argue with the salt. That tracks. Historians still argue whether ancient Javanese fermentation came more from Chinese influence or grew locally, shaped by the volcanic soil and abundant tropical fruits. What they agree on is that Javanese fermenters had serious range. From wine to vinegar to pickled snake beans, nothing was off limits. Near the edge of the platform, a cluster of women sit around a large, shallow pan, gently turning strips of something translucent. You watch for a moment before you realize these are palm sugar sheets drying in the sun. They glisten like stained glass, each one a different shade of amber and molasses brown. One woman flicks water over them with a brush made of lemongrass. Keeps the bees confused, she says. You move closer to a bamboo rack that holds dozens of woven trays, each one stacked with a different ingredient in the middle of transformation. One tray holds pepper leaves dusted with ground fermented soy. Another holds thin slices of green mango soaked in something pungent and electric. Every tray is its own tiny universe of time, yeast, and curiosity. You're offered a sample of something chewy and brown. Fermented jackfruit, someone whispers. You take a bite. It tastes like smoked raisins dipped in vinegar and then forgotten on a temple step for a week. Weirdly delicious. There's a debate happening near the fire pit. Two elders are arguing gently over whether it's proper to add crushed tamarind pits to a certain chili paste recipe. One says it deepens the flavor, the other insists it's cheating. They both shrug and laugh and keep stirring. Culinary integrity is serious, but never mean. A small child wanders past holding a gourd full of bubbling sap, followed by a dog who's definitely smelled something exciting. You step aside again. The dog ignores you. The child nods solemnly, as if to say, fermentation waits for no one. Near the edge of the distillery, half hidden in shadow, is a table holding bottles of something dark green. Spiced herbal tonic, the brewer explains. Good for joints, memory, and bad poetry. You raise an eyebrow. The bad poetry stays, but you forget it faster. She hands you a tiny cup. It tastes like moss and lightning. Not entirely pleasant, but you feel your posture straighten involuntarily. You hand the cup back and mutter your thanks. She smiles with all her teeth. Come back in 5 years. That batch will be perfect. A breeze kicks up, rustling the banana leaves and carrying with it the layered scent of sweet rot and smoke. It's oddly comforting, like a forest remembering its childhood. Before you go, they give you a tiny sealed jar. Do not open until next full moon, the apprentice says. Or do. Who are we to stop curiosity? You tuck the jar into your sash and turn to leave. One last look over your shoulder, and the brewer waves with a ladle. The chickens have climbed onto one of the jar lids and begun arguing among themselves. Business as usual. You descend the hill slowly, your step lighter than before. Somewhere inside you, something is fermenting too. Maybe a thought, maybe a new flavor, maybe just that one poem about jackfruit you'll never write.
You follow the stone path eastward now, curving past a grove of tamarind trees whose feathery leaves cast dancing shadows across the worn earth. The air here carries a different energy. Less kitchen, more workshop. Ahead is a cluster of modest wooden buildings, with open sides and wide overhanging roofs. Smoke curls lazily from several chimneys, and the rhythmic tapping of tools echoes like a metronome for the countryside. Welcome to the world of ancient Javanese artisans. Not the jewelers were sculptors this time, but the potters, smiths, and carpenters who made the mundane magical. You approach a shaded pavilion where a potter sits cross-legged beside a slow-turning kick wheel. His sarong is streaked with clay, and his bare feet rhythmically nudge the wheel into motion. On the platform beside him sit dozens of vessels, some large and round-bellied, others slender with pointed necks, and a few that look suspiciously like chickens if chickens had secret compartments. He presses his palms around a rising column of clay, and it unfurls like a cobra. "This one is for cooling palm wine," he says, not looking up. "Keeps it cold even in the heat. Like magic, but cheaper." You nod as though you understand thermodynamics. Nearby, another potter smooths the edges of a small oil lamp shaped like a lotus bud. "You'd be surprised how often people burn their eyebrows," she mutters. "Form matters." On a bamboo drying rack, dozens of fired pieces await glazing. They're not the dainty china you might imagine. These are rugged, utilitarian, and oddly beautiful. Clay in earthy tones of ochre, smoke gray, and warm rust, often etched with simple, rhythmic patterns. Nothing showy, everything useful, but just enough flourish to make the heart smile. Historians still argue whether the spiral motifs found on some Javanese pots are purely decorative or symbolic, a kind of silent language passed through generations. Some say it's a prayer for abundance. Others insist it's just the potter's equivalent of doodling. Both explanations feel right. To your left, a forge crackles behind a stone windbreak, and you drift toward the heat. A blacksmith in a soot-smeared tunic is working on a blade, small, curved, the kind used more for slicing palm stems than dramatic duels. Still, he works it like it matters. He dips it in water with a hiss and sets it aside before noticing you. "Want to see something useful?" he asks. Then gestures to a tray of delicate iron objects beside a bucket of water. You peer closer. It's not weapons. It's a set of cooking tongs, 3 rice spoons, a hair comb, and a fish scaler that looks like a tiny rake for a fairy's garden. He picks up the scaler proudly. "This one, my best seller. Even the village priest uses it." You look skeptical. He shrugs. The priest eats fish, doesn't he? In the corner of the workshop, a carpenter shapes a rice chest, tall, slender, and smelling of teak and camphor. He carves a pattern along the base, zigzags and stylized leaves. "He keeps out mice and spirits," he says, winking, "but mostly mice." His bench is cluttered with projects in various stages: low stools, storage boxes, and a woven bamboo fan repaired with a clever bit of bone needlework. You spot a headrest shaped like a crescent moon. "Is that comfortable?" you ask. He shrugs. "Not at first, but you get used to it. Like marriage." Just beyond the carpenter's space is a tiny annex where women weave cords from banana fiber and rattan. Their fingers fly in intricate patterns, twisting, knotting, looping. You realize these are the people behind slings, sacks, nets, and the shoulder straps that carry everything from water jars to infants. Not glamorous, but indispensable. One of the weavers shows you a tiny pouch meant for holding dried herbs during long journeys. "Tie it under your sash," she says. "Smells better than you after 3 days on a riverboat." Even within this practical world, there's room for play. A young apprentice proudly shows you a wooden puzzle box she carved, a sliding lid, hidden latch, and a compartment inside just big enough to hide a betel nut or a secret note. "For lovers," she whispers dramatically, then blushes and hides the box again. A parrot sits atop one of the roof beams, muttering something that sounds like a proverb, but might just be bird gossip. No one seems to notice. You move on to a shaded corner, where a woman polishes a long brass mirror. Not the kind for vanity. This one is flat, disc-shaped, with carvings of mythical birds along the rim. Used to catch sunlight or reflect the moon, sometimes to find lice. It's a flexible object. There's a smell here, too, metal and dust, but also wood smoke and something vaguely citrusy. You look around and spot a tray of camphor cubes stacked like sugar loaves, for keeping insects out of storage jars, or for awkward guests. Burn a cube, and they leave early. Even the broom leaning in the corner isn't quite ordinary. Its handle is carved with twisting vines, and its bristles are made from coconut husk fiber tied with red string. There's no such thing as just a broom, the carpenter insists. That's what lazy people say. Everywhere you look, there's care. Care in materials, in shapes, in little carved faces that peek out from spoon handles or incense trays. These were objects made by hand, over time, for specific needs, and sometimes just because it brought joy. You pick up a shallow bowl with tiny holes carved into the base. "Soap dish?" you ask. A boy shakes his head. "No, cricket stage." He whistles once, and from a reed cage in the corner, a single cricket chirps like applause. You place the bowl down gently. The boy nods solemnly. He prefers red clay. The day stretches golden around you. The forge cools. The potter covers his wheel. One of the weavers begins humming a tune older than the hills, and the sound of tools fades to soft laughter. Here, in this working corner of the past, you feel time stretch sideways, measured not in battles or kings, but in rice spoons and crickets. And maybe, just maybe, that's the truest kind of history.
You leave the artisans behind, their gentle chatter and rhythmic clinking fading like the tail end of a lullaby, and find yourself drifting toward the outer edge of the settlement. The path narrows here, winding past scrubby bushes and tall grasses, where the only sounds are the creaking of bamboo in the breeze and the occasional bird calling out like it's lost something important. A low structure comes into view, a sort of shelter, half open to the elements, its roof thatched and drooping slightly under the weight of time. You pause, then duck inside. At first you think you've wandered into a storeroom. The place is crowded with bundles of twigs, woven mats, large clay jugs, and a suspicious number of dried leaves tied into little pouches. But no, this is something different. You've stepped into a Javanese apothecary, a traditional healer's world. She doesn't greet you right away. She's busy grinding something in a stone mortar, her arm moving in slow, practiced circles. The pestle is worn from decades of use. She finally looks up, her eyes crinkled with mischief. "You've got too much wind in your liver," she says, as if this is the most obvious thing in the world. You blink. She grins. Everyone does this time of year. There's a long tradition of holistic medicine in ancient Java, part practical, part spiritual, part herbalist folklore passed from aunties who've never met a book but know exactly how to cure a rash using crushed fern and a whisper. She points to a row of bamboo tubes hung from the rafters. "Hair tonics," she says, "mostly coconut oil and betel root, good for shine, bad for gossip." You decide not to ask what that means. On a table in the center are shallow bowls filled with various powders, yellow turmeric, greenish galangal, something dark red that smells alarmingly like hot stone and tamarind. "This one's for digestion," she says, waving vaguely toward the red stuff, "or heartbreak. sometimes both. One corner is devoted entirely to bundles of dried flowers and stems, fragrant ginger, cloves, jasmine, cinnamon bark tied with banana fiber string, used in bathing rituals, especially before weddings or exams or lawsuits. Historians still argue whether these rituals were more medicinal or symbolic. Some say the scented baths were to soothe the body. Others believe they were intended to cleanse bad spirits or just to impress the in-laws. Near the wall is a wooden rack stacked with ceramic pots, each labeled in Javanese script. You lean closer and read them aloud. Cough, fertility, snakes, and memory. You hesitate. Wait, snakes and memory are different, right? The healer chuckles. Depends how much you remember. You peer into a squat jar and find tiny black seeds floating in a clear liquid. Leech repellent, she offers, and before you can ask if it works, she lifts her foot to show you a bite on her ankle. Mostly. She opens a chest and reveals rows of wrapped leaves folded like envelopes. Choose, she says. Herbal lozenges. This one for sore throat, that one if your uncle won't stop talking. She hands you one, with a wink. It tastes like pepper and mint and maybe mild resentment. At the back of the space, behind a hanging cloth, lies a smaller room. The air is cooler here, heavy with the scent of burning sandalwood and old secrets. This is the sacred corner, reserved for divination and dream work. You glance around, a low stool beside a bowl of water, a deck of palm leaf manuscripts etched with tiny script, a carved wooden mask perched atop a gourd. Sometimes, she says, you don't need a remedy, you need a story. She traces a spiral in the dust. People forget the body listens to metaphor. Say your chest is heavy, maybe you're sad, or maybe you ate too much rice. Either way, we treat both. One shelf contains what appear to be dolls made of dried banana leaves. Puppets, you ask. Diagnosis tools, she corrects. Each one holds a different emotion. You show me which one looks like you today, and we start from there. You point to one that seems to be frowning while also juggling. She nods. Classic liver wind. Before you leave, she presses something into your hand, a smooth stone wrapped in cloth, smelling faintly of lemongrass and charcoal. To keep the ants out, she says cryptically. You don't question it. Outside, you realize you feel lighter. Not just from the joke medicine and the herbal lozenge, but because spaces like this remind you that healing was once about more than biology. It was storytelling, scent, ritual, and trust woven into the daily breath of a place. As you walk away, you catch her humming softly behind you, mixing something in her mortar, probably for heartbreak, indigestion, or a particularly talkative uncle. You pass a family burning citronella leaves to keep mosquitoes away. One child is rubbing clove oil into his wrists, grimacing dramatically while his siblings laugh. Someone's grandmother yells from inside the house, recommending garlic on the soles of the feet just in case. It's a world that doesn't separate healing from living. Every spice in the kitchen doubles as a cure. Every breeze is part diagnosis. Every cup of tea carries a prescription no one asked for, but somehow always needed. And now, as you head toward the quieter parts of the village once more, you're not just walking with your eyes. Your nose is remembering. Your skin is humming. Your feet feel like they know more than they did when you began this journey. One last whiff of turmeric in the air, a waft of warm rice water from a distant kitchen, a whisper of sandalwood, like a voice you didn't realize you missed until it spoke again.
You follow the scent of sandalwood and cloves until it gives way to something else. Sour, smoky, earthy. A tang you recognize, though not from this time. It smells like fire and ferment. You're near the kitchen again, but not the grand banquet kitchen of earlier, the midnight one. This is the after-hours heart of the household. Tucked behind woven screens and shaded by banana trees, it hums with a secret rhythm. You slip through an opening, Careful not to knock over a basket of charcoal or trip on the sleeping cats stretched luxuriously across a bamboo mat. Inside, the light is low. A few clay lamps flicker on wall shelves, their flames swaying as if whispering old gossip. 3 cooks are seated cross-legged on the floor, slowly grinding ingredients in stone mortars, their conversation lilting and unhurried. None of them look surprised to see you. "Can't sleep?" one asks, not looking up. "Didn't think so," another says, sprinkling salt into a wide wooden bowl like she's feeding pigeons. This isn't the realm of measured recipes or pristine presentation. This is where flavor is coaxed out by memory and mood. Midnight kitchens in ancient Java weren't just for meals. They were spaces of comfort, confession, sometimes even low-stakes rebellion. The fire pit glows low in the center. A clay pot sits atop it, bubbling faintly. You catch hints of ginger, tamarind, and something floral, maybe pandan leaf. The third cook, an older man with soot-smudged fingers, stirs it slowly. "Rice porridge," he says, "good for dreams." You sit beside him. He hands you a chipped cup filled with warm tamarind tea. It's tart, grounding, and oddly energizing. "Keeps the ghosts out," he says, not entirely joking. One of the women is wrapping sticky rice in banana leaves. She's quick, practiced. Fold, tuck, tie. "For later," she says. "Some people sleep better knowing breakfast is already made." You sip your tea and realize this space is softer than the feast halls. Here, there's no need to impress, only to nourish. Someone sets down a basket of leftover ingredients from the day's cooking: wilted greens, a half-finished tuber, a small pile of duck bones. "Midnight stew," they say simply, tossing it all into a pot with herbs and scraps of smoked fish. Nothing wasted, even ghost seed. Historians still argue whether these kitchens were official parts of noble households or informal spaces carved out by staff and servants. What's clear is that they were indispensable. If dinner was ceremony, midnight cooking was intimacy. The cooks begin trading stories. One remembers a time when a prince snuck in for boiled eggs because he hated the official dessert. Another recalls a midnight thunderstorm when they roasted bananas to keep warm and accidentally invented a now famous sweet. You ask what they're making now, and one answers, "Not sure yet. We're listening to the ingredients." The older cook grins. "Sometimes the ingredients tell you what to do. Sometimes they don't. That's when we sing to them." He hums a low melody as he stirs. You think it might be a lullaby, or maybe a recipe. Behind you, someone's heating palm sugar in a small pan, letting it melt in the syrup. She drizzles it over slices of grilled cassava. The sweetness clings to the air like memory. You take a bite and suddenly feel like you're 10 years old and sick in bed, comforted by food and the people who made it without asking questions. Another tray emerges, this time with roasted coconut slices dusted in salt. "For dreaming," she says. "Crunchy dreams, not soft ones." A small wooden whistle lies beside the spice basket. "For chasing mice," the cook says, deadpan. "Or in case the eggplants start talking again." You almost believe her. One corner of the kitchen holds an array of jars with mysterious contents: chili paste, fermented mango, anchovy mash, honeyed dates. You don't ask. It's best not to ask. Midnight kitchens keep their secrets. Suddenly, the cat stretches, yawns, and begins batting a stray pepper across the floor like it's practicing for something serious. No one stops it. It's clearly on the payroll. You realize there's no hierarchy here. No sous chef, no head cook. Just instinct, habit, and shared knowledge passed in burnt fingers and well-worn laughter. One of the women hands you a slice of yam cake, still warm from the coals. It's sticky, earthy, and just a bit spicy. Eat slowly. It won't change anything, but it helps. You lean back against a woven mat propped against the wall, watching the flames dance low in the pit. The smells have grown familiar now. Wood smoke,
rice, fish sauce, the faint funk of fermented greens. All the odors that might horrify you in daylight feel deeply comforting here, like an old wool blanket that smells faintly of attic and childhood. Someone tosses a handful of lemongrass on the coals, just for the scent. Keeps the kitchen dreaming, she murmurs. You nod, not entirely sure what that means, but understanding it anyway. Outside, a dog barks once, then quiets. A breeze nudges the hanging herbs, making them rustle like dry applause. The coals glow. The cooks hum. The cat purrs in rhythm with the spoon scraping the pot. You take one more bite of yam cake, then let your eyes close just for a moment. In this moment, this firelit hush of fragrant smoke and stories simmering in broth, you understand the real secret of the midnight kitchen. It's not the food. It's the permission to need comfort, to whisper instead of shout, to stir without knowing exactly what you're making, and trust it'll be right in the end.
The fire is lower now. Embers blink lazily beneath the last pot, where the midnight stew murmurs to itself in thick, savory bubbles. You rise gently from your seat in the kitchen, brushing a bit of rice flour from your sleeve. No one stops you. The cooks simply nod, as if saying, "You'll be back." They always come back. You step outside, into a moon-washed courtyard. Cool air curls against your arms, scented with frangipani and the damp hush of near-sleeping earth. In the far distance, a gong sounds once, low and hollow, as if someone pressed the sky like a drum. There's a narrow path here, edged with stone lanterns and sleeping vines, and it seems to wind not through space, but time itself. You follow it. After all, isn't that what you've been doing this whole evening? Ahead, soft light glows from a long, low building made of woven bamboo walls and a thatched roof. The door is open just a crack. You slip inside. This is the household apothecary, or, as your host once whispered conspiratorially, the room of mights and maybes, because here is where healing met guessing, and guessing was very persuasive. Baskets and jars line every shelf. Dried roots, pickled lizards, powdered hornbill beak, allegedly, crushed betel nut, safflower petals, dried leech husks, and one small cloth bag ominously labeled, "Do not open unless very desperate." A woman sits cross-legged at a low table, grinding something to powder between two stones. Her fingers are stained ochre red, her eyebrows elegantly slanted, and her expression somewhere between stern and amused. "You look recently well-fed," she says, without looking up. You nod. Your stomach agrees, firmly. She gestures toward a row of ceramic bowls filled with infusions in varying shades of brown and green. Digestives, she offers, sleep teas, heart teas, very polite poisons. That one makes you forget your childhood, but only your third-best memories. She's joking, probably. Historians still debate the exact medical knowledge available in ancient Javanese noble houses. Herbal manuscripts from the period mention over 200 known treatments, ranging from simple turmeric poultices to enchanted fish scales dried in sun and soaked in rainwater under a full moon. It's unclear whether most of these worked, but it's even less clear whether that mattered. You're handed a cup of something that smells like dried jasmine and roasted fennel. You sip it. It tastes like caution and maybe almond milk. As you sit, another figure slips in, a boy barely 10, trailing a blanket and rubbing his eyes. The woman pours him a tiny cup of hot pandan water and pats the seat beside her. "Bad dreams," she explains. You don't ask what kind. Everyone's had at least one. She picks up a small brush and begins painting on parchment,
Charms, she says, though they look like doodles with ambition. Stick this under your pillow, she says, handing the boy a folded square. It tells the sleep demons you're taken. The boy accepts it solemnly and pads back out into the night, blanket trailing like a shadow. You ask if it works. Sometimes, she says, depends on the demon. Some just want a snack. She shows you a drawer filled with distraction charms, little cloth bundles tied with threads soaked in ginger and ink, meant to give wandering spirits something to fiddle with so they don't disturb your dreams. It's the spiritual equivalent of handing someone bubble wrap, she explains. There's another cabinet labeled for restlessness, which includes salted apricot stones, dried lavender sewn into scraps of sari silk, and a tiny bronze bell you're supposed to ring once before bed to clear out leftover arguments. You try the bell. It sounds like a hiccup trying to be profound. On one shelf is a bundle of palm leaves tied with hair. A love cure, she says, or a love problem. We're not always sure which is which. She leans over a box of tiny carved stones and selects one shaped vaguely like a frog. Keep this in your shoe if you want to forget someone. Or remember them without the ache. I forget which. Open scholarly debates still swirl around the intersection of medicine and mysticism in this period. Did people believe more fervently because they had fewer options? Or did their belief make the options work? No one agrees. And maybe they don't need to. Not everything in the body responds to reason. Some things need stories more than solves. You're invited to stir a pot of herbs steeping on the back stove. You do, and immediately feel calmer. Probably a coincidence. Or maybe that's what they want you to think. Above the door hangs a row of feathers and bone charms for nightmares, hangovers, and birds with grudges. You arch your brow. The woman shrugs. We've had worse visitors. The air here is thicker than in the feast halls, heavier, like a library that's forgotten most of its books but remembers how they smelled. She presses a bit of cooled paste into your palm. For sleep, she murmurs. Spread it on your pulse points, or your pillow, or someone you'd like to dream of. You look down. It's soft, violet gray, and smells faintly of sugar and ash. You decide not to ask what's in it. In the corner, a shallow bowl of water ripples slightly. She taps its edge with a finger. If it ripples 3 times, she says, it means you're ready to leave. If it doesn't, you weren't here long enough. It ripples once, twice, a 3rd time. She smiles. Off you go. You thank her. She waves you out with one hand, already turning back to her grinding stone. The door clicks shut behind you. Back outside, the moon hangs lower. The path shines pale silver, and the garden smells like crushed herbs and quiet memory. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime answers an invisible question. And you? You keep walking.
The final path leads you back, not to the feast hall, not to the kitchens, but somewhere entirely new. You follow the moonlit stones through a narrow gate framed by vines and low torches, their flames sputtering softly in the midnight breeze. A faint hush hangs in the air, as though the garden itself is listening. And maybe it is. After everything you've seen tonight, you wouldn't be surprised. This is the Midnight Kitchen. At least, that's what your host called it, with a twinkle in his eye that suggested it wasn't quite a kitchen, and not only open at midnight. You enter a small, open-air courtyard. It's surrounded by walls of bamboo lattice, through which moonlight weaves delicate patterns on the ground. 3 old women sit in a circle around a charcoal brazier. Their robes are faded indigo, the color of rain just before it gives up and falls. One is peeling long strips of jackfruit. Another is roasting something wrapped in banana leaves. The third simply stirs a pot, humming to herself, and occasionally tapping the spoon twice on the edge. Tap, tap, like punctuation in a language only she speaks. They don't ask who you are. They don't ask why you're here. One of them pats the empty seat beside her and says, "You'll want to try this." You sit. You always sit. What follows isn't a feast. It isn't even a meal exactly. It's a tasting menu of memory, whisper, and imagination. The roasted thing is unwrapped. It's sticky rice, scented with pandan and coconut milk, stuffed with something that tastes like mango and childhood. The woman slicing jackfruit sets down a sliver so thin it's translucent. You chew it and taste sunlight filtered through your grandmother's curtains. The pot reveals a savory porridge laced with galangal, garlic, and what she calls forgotten chicken. You don't ask. It's comforting in the way lullabies are comforting, gentle and a little sad. As you eat, the oldest of the three starts telling stories. Not grand epics, not royal feasts or court scandals. These are kitchen stories. Recipes traded at village wells, jokes made over dough, the exact right moment to add cinnamon if you want a dish to remember something it forgot. She speaks of women who sang to their rice pots so the grains would not stick, of men who believed turmeric on the left hand kept nightmares away, of children who stole the cooling custard and left behind notes written in sugar. She talks about laughter baked into flatbread and sorrow hidden in bitter melon, of tea brewed not to be drunk, but poured into soil to honor an ancestor who loved orchids more than conversation. You sip from a cup of herbal infusion that smells like lemongrass and something more distant. Salt? Smoke? You can't quite tell. It tastes like stories you've only half heard. One of the women brings out a tray of old metal molds shaped like turtles, phoenixes, and stars. Mooncakes, she says, not for eating, for dreaming. She gives you one. It's too light to be food, and the pattern on its surface is unreadable. You tuck it into your sleeve pocket, just in case. A quiet stretches among you, deep and unhurried. The oldest woman finally looks at you and asks, "What did you learn tonight?" It's a genuine question, but also rhetorical. You open your mouth, then close it again. She nods. Good answer. Historians still debate what midnight kitchens were really for. Were they literal places, metaphors, an invention of later folklore romanticizing the Tang courts? No firm records survive, just hints, just quiet mentions in poems. Between the dragon's breath and the first tea, there is always one last taste. One line reads. Someone once argued they were a symbol of overflow when the official feast was done, but appetite, memory, and imagination lingered, a place for those who were still a little hungry or not quite ready for sleep. The wind picks up slightly. A bell chimes in the distance. One of the women yawns. She says, "It's time." Not to go, but to stay still. They each rise one by one and disappear silently into the bamboo shadows, leaving only the embers and the breeze and the scent of pandan clinging softly to the night. You lean back on your elbows, staring up through the trellis where moonlight drapes like gauze across the stars. You're not full exactly, but you're no longer hungry. And that, perhaps, is the point. Wind down sequence begins. And now, let everything soften. The memory of flavor, the echo of laughter, the gentle weight of nighttime on your eyelids. The dishes are done, the story's told. There's nothing more to seek, and nowhere else to be. Breathe in. Let the cool air of the garden fill your lungs. Breathe out, slow and steady, like steam rising from a forgotten teacup. The crickets begin to hum again, low and rhythmic, like a lullaby written by leaves and time. You shift your weight, letting your body melt into whatever surface holds you, mat, cushion, the safe cradle of your bed. Your pulse slows, your thoughts dim like lanterns one by one extinguished. You can still taste jasmine, maybe. Still feel the silk napkin between your fingers. Or was it a dream? Maybe you never sat at that feast. Maybe it was always waiting inside you, a banquet of memory shaped like a story. The moon is lower now, and the fire is ash. And you? You rest, you dream, you drift.